All right, jumping to the PowerPoint. All of the PowerPoints are available for you guys on Moodle. I want to make sure you guys have access to everything. You guys should have all the handouts and everything like that. So OSM policies, expectation. I mean, you guys have been in school before. You guys have been here in classes at OSM before. I do have very high expectations for my students. My expectation is perfect attendance. I expect everyone makes an A in my class. These are my expectations. So if you're not meeting my expectations, get with me and let's figure out a plan and figure out maybe we need tutoring. I'm cool with making tutoring. I'm cool with whatever I can do, to help you out. Students who've been in my class before will tell you I will bend over backwards and do anything I can to help you out, but you have to come to me and ask me for help. You are adults. I will not be chasing you guys down over every little B minus or C that you guys make. So get at me if you guys have questions, issues, problems, you need tutoring, you need something re-explained to you. Your job is to let me know what you need. Then my job is to make sure that I get it to you. Good stuff? When I say good stuff, you say good stuff. Good stuff?
Good stuff.
Good stuff.
Awesome. Okay. So read through the course material, read through the syllabus, read through the assignments. Make sure that you're reading through the PowerPoint ahead of class. This class goes a lot smoother when you read ahead and you come to class with questions versus coming to class and being exposed to the material for the first time that week. That generally does not bode very well. This class, we meet a grand total of about 3 hours a week. You will need at least 6 hours of studying outside of class in order to stay on top of things. Kinesiology is a lot of information. There's no way around it. I'm sorry, it's a lot of crap. Now, I have a funny way of teaching kinesiology. It's my own little way that I like to do things. You may not get exposed to my way of teaching kinesiology very often. I like to keep it simple. I like to keep it fun. I like to say, if you focus on understanding the concept that I'm trying to get to you, then you will be in a much better position to make guesses or to maybe narrow down choices off a multiple choice test. My recommendation is that you don't stress so much about memorizing every single detail of every single muscle. I would much rather you focus on the big ideas and the concepts. However, that being said, kinesiology will get down to a point where you have to memorize it. There's no way around it. You do have to learn every muscle, its origin, its insertion, and its action. And that's a lot of information, you guys. When we talk about a muscle, that's the name of the muscle. Bicep brachii, deltoid. When we talk about origin and insertion, those answers are going to be bony landmarks. So when I ask you, for example, give me the origin and the insertion of your biceps brachii. The origin is the supraglenoid tubercle of the scapula and the coracoid process of the scapula. The insertion is the radial tuberosity. Those are all bony landmarks. Its action is the body movement that muscle causes when that muscle contracts. So for the bicep, there's really two major actions that we look at, which is shoulder flexion and elbow flexion. So when the muscle shortens, it brings the arm up kind of parallel to the ground and it flexes the elbow. So if that was a lot of information all at once, buckle your seatbelts. Welcome to kinesiology. This is going to be really fun. So this is a 10-week course. You can miss one class penalty free. If you miss anything more than that, you got to talk to me. That's an unsatisfactory for the class. Participation is both in these lectures as well as in class. So I need you here every Monday at noon for this little lecture. I will go over the basic material for the muscles that we're going to cover that week. You guys will have a couple of days to kind of marinate in that material. and then we will practice it more hands-on in class later in the week. When we go into class, we will be doing hands-on. So bring your sheets, please and thank you. Week 5, when we get to the abdominal region, ladies, we're gonna have to do abdominal palpation, wear a sports bra, bring a towel or something. We could do breast draping because we have to expose the abdomen, we have to palpate around. Minimum grade is a 75 for anything. Anything you turn into me has to be a 75% minimum in order for it to be considered passing. This includes your homework assignments, quizzes, the finals, everything. Ongoing homework. Every week, there will be a list of muscles you will need to produce muscle cards for, as well as every few weeks, there's a postural evaluation. All of this material is in the handouts. You guys have got to read through it. When I talk about muscle cards, I'm skipping ahead. Okay. So kinesiology, as we said, the study of human kinetics, it's the science of body movement. We get there by understanding which muscles create which kinds of movements, which muscles, for example, create shoulder flexion or neck extension or elbow rotation. Then we have to understand where those muscles attach. Specifically, on the skeleton, where does this muscle begin? Where does this muscle end? Our objectives in the class is to define the structure and function of each joint. That's a usually pretty simple objective. Learn the vocabulary related to kinesiology and use it precisely. So in the beginning, we get a little easier with the vocabulary, but as we move towards the end of the class, we never say words like bend, we say flex. We don't say straighten, we say extend, right? Good stuff?
Good stuff.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. All right. We're going to understand how bones and joints and muscles all work together to make movements in the body happen. And then we're going to identify through palpation, physically touching the body and understanding where that muscle sits. Muscles are superficial. You can feel them. So we're going to identify all the structures that are relevant to us every week, and then we will demonstrate the actions of that muscle and place the muscle in both shortened and lengthened positions. Muscles, this is a bad analogy, but muscles are kind of like springs. They can be shortened and they can be lengthened. So when a muscle shortens is when that muscle performs its action. Let's go back to our example of the bicep. When the bicep shortens, it pulls on the radius and flexes the elbow. Flexes, that is a technical word. The word flexion means we are reducing the angle in a joint or closing a joint. Extension is the opposite. Extension is increasing the angle of a joint or opening a joint. So for every muscle, we're going to need to know its name and its action or actions. We will also need to know its origins and its insertions, the specific bony landmarks from which that muscle either arises or inserts. As with everything else in anatomy and medicine, we use ancient Greek and Latin to name these things. If you took Latin in high school, awesome. This might not be so difficult for you. But for everyone else who did not take Latin in high school, welcome to anatomy. It is like learning another language, and we have to learn a language because it's got to be very technical and very precise. We cannot have room for any misunderstanding or misinterpretation when we're using a technical medical language. If you get stumped on a name, by the way, etymology is one of my nerd superpowers too. So I like learning where words come from and what they mean. And understanding where the words come from really does help understand why we pick that word to name that particular muscle. So many times we will name something just based on its shape. Good example is the deltoid. The Greek letter, I'm gonna say this slide is I'm gonna say wrong, but this slide is not really correct. Delta, Latin for triangle. The Greek letter delta is a triangle. Like the letter was a triangle. The ending oid, O-I-D, that's a Greek suffix. When you hear that word part oid, it's kind of like a scientific word for ish. Like it's kind of like a triangle. So when you look at the deltoid muscle, right, we think of like Superman, he's got that shoulder cap muscle that comes down to a sharp V. Yeah, we know what I'm talking about, yeah? So what the name is telling you, the deltoid muscle is a triangle-ish muscle. It kind of resembles a triangle in that it's flat on top, pointed at the bottom. Just like the Greek letter triangle, except the deltoid is upside down. So that is what the name means. You will see things like this all the time in kinesiology. Sometimes the name of the muscle is reflecting its geometric shape. So like the name teres just tells you rounded. The name oblique, like your external obliques. Oblique tells you that the muscle runs at an angle. It's not straight up or down. It's not transverse. It's angled. That is what oblique means. And you can also see muscles named based on their location. So if you see a muscle like latissimus dorsi, right? Latis tells you lateral, dorsi tells you back. So the latissimus dorsi is telling you where it is. It's on the side, on the back. Lat dorsi sits right there on the side of your back. Biceps brachii. The last name brachii refers to the brachial region, the region of the upper arm. It's telling you where the muscle is positioned. Good stuff? Good stuff.
Good stuff.
Okay. Palpation. We will be doing palpation in our hands-on classes where we will be physically like touching the body to assess the location of the muscle, the tone of the muscle, things like that. Trail Guide is the best resource for learning kinesiology that I have found in my career. I've been teaching massage for a really long time. Everyone that I know uses the Trail Guide. It is simply the best. So I highly encourage you, my fellow students, do not treat the Trail Guide like a reference book, like a dictionary, where you kind of open the book, you jump in to read what you need, and then you jump back out. Think of the Trail Guide like an actual book. It works best when you read it front to back, cover to cover, right? It's not like a dictionary where you just kind of pick and choose around from page to page. The Trail Guide has a lot of resources online. They have a lot of videos. I highly encourage you guys to look into those things. They also have flashcards, Trail Guide flashcards. Those are awesome. Awesome. Okay. So on these slideshows, you will see from time to time these little green kind of bangs with numbers in them. Those numbers are cluing you in to the basis of what you need to know for that muscle. So for example, the tricep brachii. Tricep is a muscle on the back of the arm. It's responsible for extension. The tricep, the name tricep means three-headed. It has three heads. So each of those heads has to attach somewhere. It has three origins. There are three spots somewhere in the shoulder where the muscle begins. It has one insertion, meaning one place where the muscle ends. The muscle will perform three actions. It does three things, namely shoulder flexion, or I'm sorry, shoulder extension, elbow extension, and I believe my mind's going blank right now. It's not important. The point is, when you see these little three kind of, or these colorful bangs, the numbers are telling you three origin, one insertion, three actions. Just a little post-it note to kind of keep your mind straight as to what all you needed to know about the muscle. Every week, you guys will have homework. The most regular are going to be your muscle cards. These will be due every week. They are due, follow me here, they are due the week after we cover the muscles. So treat this homework assignment as kind of like your final study thing. We've gone over the muscles in our online lecture, then we go to class at the end of the week, we do our hands-on stuff, then we go to class the following week. We have our online lecture for the new muscles. When we meet in class, that is when I want your muscle cards from the last week. So Thursday, when we go to class, there is nothing due. We are still going over the muscles for the muscle cards. This week's muscles, I expect those cards next week. Is that clear? Good stuff, good stuff. Every muscle card needs to have a drawing of the muscle. You need to draw the muscle. List its origins, list its actions, list the insertion, and list any synergists or antagonists. This is what they will look like. I do not give you points based on how beautiful or ugly they are. So if you are not a really skilled artist, it's okay. The point of this assignment is to make you write out the material by hand. The brain remembers what the hand creates. So draw the muscle, write all your information out. You can use these certainly for studying. If you prefer to just buy the trail guide flashcards and use those to study, use those to study. But you cannot turn in trail guide flashcards as your homework assignment. I need a handwritten card like these. Good stuff? Good stuff. Personally, my advice, the best one of these that I have seen from a student was a spiral bound little notebook of index cards, like larger index cards. And he just did them, so like a flip book, he could just flip through muscles. That was my personal favorite. I do not care how you do yours. I just care that you do them. Every few weeks as well, there will be a postural evaluation. These are pretty simple worksheets. You will be given some kind of observation about an imaginary client's posture, like rounded shoulders. And then you just fill in the blank. Which muscles will be shortened because of this posture, which muscles will be lengthened because of this posture. And you can use your trail guide, you can use your class notes, anything else to complete those. Usually the postural evaluations have somewhere between 3 and 5 blanks that you have to fill in. So it is not an actual postural evaluation where you got to find someone and do an evaluation. It is a worksheet, you fill in the blanks. Okay. So for muscle attachments, we've got the O's and the I's, the origin and the insertion. Usually, the origin is the fixed attachment. What we mean to say is when the muscle contracts, the origin is the attachment site that moves the least. The insertion, on the other hand, is the attachment that moves the most. So to give you another little visual example, let's go back to our bicep. It's just a really, really good muscle to work with. Starting with the elbow, the muscle's origin is at the shoulder, its insertion is below the elbow on the radius. So when the muscle contracts, the shoulder doesn't really move. It's the radius that moves, right? So as the muscle shortens, it pulls the radius up towards the shoulder. The muscle pulls its insertion towards its origin. So the origin is the one that doesn't really move all that much. It's the insertion that is the more movable attachment. Now, generally, origins will be, when you look at the two on a muscle, generally the origin will be the one that is the more proximal, or the one that is the more superior, or the one that is more medial. Just the way it rolls. So the insertion tends to be the one that is the more distal or the more inferior or the more lateral. And I have to stress, you guys, this is usually, and we say things like tends to, because there are exceptions to all of these. So bicep is traditional. Its origin is proximal. Its insertion is distal. You want one good muscle that bucks the trend, that doesn't follow the typical rule? This muscle here, the SCM, this is its origin down here. Its insertion is behind the ear. That's the one that kind of throws us off. This is why we have to say things like usually, because there's always one that doesn't follow the rules. So
sorry, did you say the proximal medial superior is the origin typically? Or
that
the
is correct.
Okay.
No, you had it correct.
Okay.
Yeah, proximal or superior or medial tends to be the origin. Distal or inferior or lateral tends to be the insertion.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So just for linguistic kind of cleanup here, when we say origin, we could just as easily say the proximal attachment or the superior attachment or the medial attachment. We're still talking about the origin, which just welcome to anatomy. There's always 5 names to describe the same thing. We all just have to die mad about it. Anatomy is what it is. 5 names for everything. Welcome to our lives. All right. So at the crux of it, what we are looking at are muscles that are either shortening or lengthening. This is what causes every single body movement that you are capable of. Everything from scratching your nose to talking to breakdancing to football, crushing a can to petting a kitten. All of the movements of your body are created by muscles shortening or lengthening. When we talk about a muscle contracting, we're usually talking about a muscle shortening. Again, not always, but usually. So here is a very, very basic illustration of your elbow. So the fixed attachment, that would be the origin, right? We come down the humerus, somewhere here you've got the origin of the muscle. The muscle crosses over the elbow joint and then inserts onto another bone. Muscles have got to cross the joint that they're supposed to move. This is one of your golden rules of kinesiology. Rule number 1, if a muscle crosses a joint, it has got to have something to do with the movement of that joint. For this one, there are no exceptions. If a muscle crosses a joint, it has got to move that joint. Capiche? Capiche.
Capiche.
Capiche. So let's go back to our bicep example. We said the bicep flexes the shoulder and it flexes the elbow. That implies 2 things. Number 1, the bicep has got to cross the shoulder joint. Number 2, the bicep has got to cross my elbow joint. Make sense? It cannot move the joint if it does not cross that joint, right? So the bicep muscle, as much as you associate the bicep with your arm, right? You really think about it like your guns. The bicep doesn't attach to the humerus at all. It does not touch I mean, it touches, but it doesn't attach to the humerus. It begins on the scapula and then it ends on the radius. So your bicep, right? Your guns, well, hold on. Yeah, there we go. Yeah. Your bicep runs from the scapula to the radius. It does not touch the humerus. It does not attach to the humerus. It completely crosses it. But that tells you it crossed over the shoulder, so it can move the shoulder, and it crossed over the elbow, so it's got to move the elbow. No exceptions. Now, when a muscle lengthens, usually what we are looking at is the opposite of the muscle's action is occurring. Now, let me clean that up a little bit. When the bicep contracts, it flexes the elbow. When the bicep lengthens, the elbow opens. Now, this is going to be due to the action of some other muscle, okay? Muscles work in groups. Muscles have only one trick up their sleeve, and I want to be clear. Muscles have only one trick. They can only do one thing. What is that thing, my former students? What do muscles only do?
Pull.
Pull. Story, roll credits, that's it, we're done for the day. Muscles pull. That is all. They never, ever, ever. So let's think about this.
Push.
They
don't
never
ever
push. They never push. They only pull. So,
Or stay static, right?
or yeah, they could do nothing. That's an option too.
I mean, like when they're being under stress, they can also just stay static.
They can contract without changing their length.
Yeah.
But when a muscle is creating its action, when something is going on, muscles can only pull. That is all they can do. They cannot exert a pushing force. They can only pull their insertion toward their origin, and then they have to relax and allow the insertion to be pulled away by some other muscle. Okay, let's go back to the elbow. We've got my bicep on top, and I have a tricep on bottom. When this muscle contracts, it pulls the arm into flexion. Now my bicep has to relax. It can no longer stay contracted because another muscle has to pull the arm back open. The bicep can close the joint, but it cannot push the arm open again. That is not how muscles work. They only ever pull. Good stuff? Good stuff. Super. So once I have a muscle in position to close a joint, by definition now, I need another muscle located on the opposite side of that joint to perform the opposite action. So if I have a flexor on one side, I have got to have an extensor on the other side. This is the basic formula for how muscles work. And this works throughout the body, whether we're talking about neck or shoulder or arm or hip or foot or finger. All muscles ever do is pull. Let's look at my forearm here. I've got muscles here on the front, on the anterior side of my forearm. When these muscles contract, they pull my fingers and wrist into flexion. Now I have a separate group of muscles on the back side of my forearm. When these muscles contract, they pull the wrist and fingers into extension. Muscles only ever pull. That is all they do. You've got muscles that can pull from one side of the body and another group of muscles that can pull from the other side of the body. This pattern is repeated everywhere throughout the body. Good stuff? Cool. Okay, so when we talk about these muscles and doing what they're doing, we assign them names, which tell us which muscles are responsible for what. The first two terms we're going to go over are agonist and antagonist. The agonist, also known as the prime mover, is the main muscle that's doing the action, right? It's the muscle that's primarily responsible for performing some action. Now, when I say action, I just want to be clear. By action, I could be saying something like elbow flexion, right? This joint moving in this direction, that is one action. Elbow extension is a separate action. So the agonist for elbow flexion will not be the same as the agonist for elbow extension. Make sense? So the prime mover is the muscle that's doing the action, right? Whether that's shoulder flexion or neck extension, the main muscle that's pulling that load, that's the prime mover. We can also have assistant movers. which assist the agonist in the action being done. We never call them assistant movers. That's just not a term I want you guys to get stuck on. Synergist, that is the word we use, synergist. So you have your agonist, the prime mover, and synergists, which will help the prime mover. Synergists only get called in when there's an additional load or additional resistance. If you're just standing up with no weight or anything and you're just bending your elbow up and down, your bicep is doing that all by itself. Your bicep is quite capable of doing this alone. Now, let's say you take something really heavy, like my 40-pound Apple Pencil. You put weight in the hand, and now you tell the bicep to flex. Bicep can't do it by itself anymore. The load is too great. Now we have to call other muscles in to really help get that same action going on. Your prime mover has recruited all of its synergists, other muscles. Good stuff? Cool.
So Dave, are you basically just saying that the agonist consists of both the prime mover and the synergist muscles?
Yeah, thank you for asking. Let me clarify. No, the agonist will always be one muscle, period. One muscle is the agonist for some action.
Okay.
There will be a list of synergists. So let's say for elbow flexion, bicep brachii is the prime mover for elbow flexion. With no weight and no resistance, bicep does that action all by itself. When you add weight or add resistance, and now the muscles have to work harder, suddenly the bicep is not strong enough to lift a whole bunch of weight all by itself. Now it has to call in from its list of synergists, other muscles like brachialis. Brachialis is a deeper muscle. It sits underneath the bicep and it crosses the elbow. So when brachialis gets involved, it is also assisting with the same action, but it only gets called in when it's needed.
Okay. Gotcha. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So here's how I want you guys to think about these. The agonist muscle, that's your Batman. Batman saves Gotham City all by himself, quite capable of going out there and saving the day, right? But sometimes Batman can't do it on its own. Sometimes Batman needs a sidekick. So the synergist muscles, that's your Robin. These are smaller muscles that are not as strong, but they will all be recruited by the prime mover to assist with the movement that it's trying to accomplish.
Yeah, so a muscle that's an antagonist for a prime mover can also be its own agonist for a completely different thing, correct?
It totally could be, yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yep. So your antagonist muscle, for some action, right? And let's go back to our classic example, right? Bicep does elbow flexion. The antagonist muscle performs the opposite action. So if bicep flexes the elbow, the tricep extends the elbow. The tricep is the antagonist to the bicep. It does the opposite action. The antagonist is the Joker. It is running around Gotham City undoing everything that Batman has done. So when the bicep flexes the shoulder and flexes the elbow, the Joker extends the shoulder and extends the elbow, moving the limb in the opposite way or in the opposite direction. It performs the opposite action from the prime mover. Good stuff? Cool. So, your fixator muscles provide stability at proximal joints so that the movement can occur, but the movement is going to be more distal. And this is a trickier one sometimes to wrap your head around. The crux of this one is fixators themselves are not involved in the action that we're talking about. They are stabilizing a joint so that the action can occur. Let me give you an example. Let's assume my Apple Pencil has a lot of weight to it, okay? So I need a lot of muscle effort in order to lift this thing up and down. Let's say the way that I'm moving this thing, I've got my arm held straight out and I'm just doing little wrist curls, just little wrist curls. So the muscles that are doing this action are down here in my forearm. But if I feel the muscles up at my shoulder, this muscle is contracted. The muscle is doing something. What's it doing? It's not related to my wrist movement, right? These muscles do not cross joints all the way down to my wrist. So what is the muscle doing? It stabilizes my shoulder so that my main action, my wrist flexion, can occur. If this joint wasn't stabilized, the weight that I'm holding would just pull my arm down. So these muscles are not involved in the action itself, but they stabilize a proximal joint in order to allow the action to occur. Your fixator muscles are like Alfred, hanging out in the Bat Cave, right? Coordinating what's going on in the Bat Cave so that Batman can go out into Gotham City and save the day. And then we have our synergist. Your synergist, that's Robin. That's your sidekick. These are other muscles that help or enhance the action of the prime mover. So these are muscles that have the same action as the antagonist, right? So when we're doing our muscle cards and things like that, your agonists and your prime movers, these are muscles that will share the same action. Any questions so far? Any questions so far?
So are there synergists for the antagonists or just
Yes.
the agonists?
Yes, there are. But here's the thing, and I want to knock this out right now because this can get a little confusing. When we talk about prime movers and antagonists, these relate to specific body actions, like elbow flexion, okay? So after everything we've been saying, what I'm trying to get you guys to understand is for elbow flexion, bicep is the Batman, right? And the tricep is the Joker. If we change the action that we're talking about, let's say right now what I want to talk about is elbow extension, right? I'm looking for the muscles that open the elbow. Now the role of Batman and Joker have to be recast. I need new actors here in these roles. For elbow extension, now tricep is my prime mover. This is the main muscle that opens the elbow. Now bicep is my Joker. Now this is the antagonist for elbow extension. Follow me?
Yeah, that makes total sense.
Perfect. So to answer your question, yes, every muscle will have its list of synergists and its list of antagonists. But whenever we change the action that we're talking about, lateral flexion or shoulder rotation or shoulder extension, every time we change the action, the actor playing the role of Batman and Robin and Joker, all those roles get recast based on the action that we're talking about.
Yeah, okay.
Cool. So the first joint that we're going to look at in our kinesiology class is the glenohumeral joint, your shoulder joint. I tell my students all the time, this joint is the hardest one to understand. This is the most complicated. It's got the most things going on. This is the hardest one to understand. If you are starting with Kinesiology-Uppers, you're starting with the hardest one. It will all get easier after you tackle the shoulder. For my friends who started with me in Kines lowers, everything that you have learned in Kines lowers still applies exactly the same way to the upper body. So for you guys, the shoulder might be a little bit easier because you've already got these concepts down. I encourage you guys, seek out the new students who are just starting with kinesiology and form study groups with them and help them out, because you remember what kines was like your first week. It's hard stuff. It's hard stuff. So let's take a quick review for the actions, the kinds of movement that we can get out of this joint. I'm gonna back my camera up just a little bit here so I can move around. All right. Shoulder flexion. Moving the shoulder forward, just like this. Right. It's important, guys, that you bring the shoulder out forward, not out to the side. It's got to go forward. That is flexion. Now back to neutral. Shoulder extension, moving the shoulder backwards. That is extension. Adduction, shoulder adduction. Well, they put them in backwards here. Sorry. AB is moving it away from the midline, right? It's being abducted into space by a little spaceship. And then adduction, moving the limb back toward the midline. It is being added back to the body. So abduction, adduction. Horizontal abduction and adduction work like this: horizontal abduction, horizontal adduction. You are pulling the shoulder joint either away from the midline or towards the midline in the horizontal plane. That's the difference. Without the word horizontal, we are working in the coronal plane. Cool. Medial rotation. The arm, the upper arm, rotates inward, or lateral or external rotation, the arm rotates outward. And before we get too deeply into this, you guys, I want to remind us all of one critically important detail. We always refer to the body in anatomical position. Always, no exceptions. So when we start talking about the body, we always assume that the body is starting in anatomical position, just like this, with the palms facing forwards, right? So from here, we say medial rotation, or from here, we say lateral rotation. Good stuff? If we forget about anatomical position, it will screw you up bad when we start talking about how actions happen. We always start from anatomical position. Always, 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 no exceptions, never changes. Cool. So there's some illustrations. You guys can go home and practice your shoulder movements. Circumduction is a combination of all of these. It's arm circles. Take your arm into arm circles. Notice how when you go through the circle, the humerus has to rotate just a little bit in order to actually allow you to go through that range of motion. That's part of it. Circumduction is a combination of abduction, adduction, flexion, extension, and rotation. It's all of those actions kind of put together to get yourself little arm circles. Cool, cool. And we are running out of time, you guys. This is why I'm saying these 1 hour lectures fly by. Okay. On the slideshow next, we've got bony landmark stuff. I have got to assume that you guys already know your bony landmarks. We really don't have time to reteach these things. So if you have questions, please come talk to me if you have questions about bony landmarks. For those of you who are new to my class, my bachelor's was in forensic anthropology. If you've ever seen the show Bones, that's what I went to school to do. Bones are my jam. I know way more about bones than any person rightly should, so I can answer a crap ton of questions related to bones and bony landmarks. But in this class, I don't have time to reteach because we're focused on muscles here. So if you got questions, shoot me an email, message me on Moodle, smoke signals, something. But this stuff should be old hat to you. If this is not where you are, you and I need to have a talk. We need to have a conversation because you've got to know these things already coming into this class. One major site of caution or area that we want to be cautious with when we're working with clients is just behind your clavicle. Right, let's find your clavicle. It's horizontal. When the shoulder is at rest, it sits right here. Just below it, there's kind of this groove where you could feel the edge of your shoulder. Right in there, you'll notice if you really push in, it's not the most comfortable thing in the world. The brachial plexus is branching off of your spinal cord and it's running right behind your clavicle and it's going down into the arm. There are very important nerves that are running through here. So we do just want to be cautious when we're working in this area that we don't put too much pressure on a nerve. Guys, nerves do not like to be touched. If you put too much pressure on a nerve, it's going to hurt. That's what they do. So the brachial plexus is emerging between C5 and T1 here in the lower neck. It slips between two muscles in your neck, the anterior and middle scalene. They sit right about here. And it runs down into the arm. These nerves go on to innervate your upper arm, musculoskeletal nerve. That's where your bicep gets its power from. And then down into the forearm, you've got the median nerve, which innervates this part of the hand, the ulnar nerve, which innervates this part of the hand, and the radial nerve, which innervates the back of the hand. I don't need you guys to know all of that right this second, but I'm trying to get you to understand this is why we take caution in this area, because those nerves go on to do very important things. That median nerve, by the way, this is the nerve that gets damaged in carpal tunnel. That's why carpal tunnel people have numbness and stuff in their fingers. It's usually because of an impingement on that nerve. Again, pressure on a nerve, either in the wrist or sometimes up in the shoulder. Nerves do not like to be touched, y'all. No pressure. They don't like to be touched or poked or pressed or prodded or compressed or impinged or have any kind of pressure put on them in any way. If you do, it hurts. So right in that deltopectoral line is where you'll kind of find all of these nerves. You also have the axillary system, so your axillary artery, the axillary vein, the axillary nerve, and a whole bunch of lymph nodes right on the underarm. So we're careful when we go into people's underarms. There are nerves and blood vessels and lymph nodes very, very close to the surface. So we just generally use a lot of caution if you have to work in someone's underarm. It's not uncommon that you do. There are many different techniques and stuff that require you to be all up in your client's underarm. Just be aware. There's delicate structures very close to the surface. Okay, I'm moving on. I am out of time. It is 1 o'clock. When we go to class, this intro day, I lose a lot of time having to cover the basic stuff. When we go into class later on this week, these are the 5 muscles that we will be taking first. I ask you guys, go ahead and read your trail guide for these muscles. Make sure that you've got some idea about what's going on. I do not expect you to have everything memorized by Thursday. That is not realistic on my part. What I do expect is that you've read them. Okay, read through them. Start to get an idea of what is going on. My expectation Thursday when we come to class is that you have read these muscles from the trail guide and that you come to me with some questions. Because if you read this and it made perfect sense to you and everything, you're a fucking prodigy and I don't know what to say. But I expect you guys will have some questions because this is a lot. Deltoid muscle right on the shoulder, pec major, the large chest muscle, teres major, smaller muscle over on the lateral side of the shoulder. Latissimus dorsi, the very broad muscle on the back side. And coracobrachialis, which I'll forgive if you've never heard before. It's called the armpit muscle. It sits right here, right there. Read through them. We will talk much more in depth about those muscles in class later. I believe it's Thursday, but off the top of my head. Before we break for the afternoon, I want to bring us back together. Do we have any questions over what we've gone over so far today?
Why is it called the shoulder joint called the glenohumeral joint?
It's named after the bony landmarks. It's named after the bony landmarks. Your glenoid fossa is the socket for the head of the humerus. So glenohumeral joint.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions, you guys? Is that a ferret? Bruce,
Yeah,
is that a ferret?
yeah, it is.
Ah!
You wanted to say hi.
They're cool. All right, no more questions, you guys?
Thank you so much.
Oh, Dave, if we
All right.
want to buff
Yeah.
up on the bony processes, is there, like, in the trail guide book, is there a certain page that would help us with that?
So the way the trail guide is divided, it breaks it up by body region. So it starts with like shoulder and arm, and then it goes into like head, neck, face, and things like that. They, as you flip through each section, it does have diagrams where it lays out all the bony landmarks. You can use those to review. One of the things that I use to teach, though, and this is for just about every class that I do teach. Let me share my screen one more time. I use this app called Complete Anatomy. And this is the best app for anatomy that I have ever found. It is not the only one. There are lots of other apps like it. This just happens to be the best one that I found. So for every system, it will allow me to, what happened? Sorry, Zoom kicked me out.
I still see you. Oh,
You see me on my laptop. You see the screen that I'm sharing on my iPad. So I've got like a 2-screen deal going on.
oh, gotcha.
There we go. So this app will allow me to kind of highlight different features of bones. And then again, anything on here that I tap on, it will highlight and give me a whole blurb about it. So when we get to, you know, like, let's just like look at the scapula, for example, the spine of the scapula. When I tap on it, it will highlight it. And then all on the side, it gives me lots and lots of different things about it. If I were to, I mean, since we're here to talk about muscles, I'll add in the muscular system. I'll click on bicep. So then it gives me all the info about the bicep, right? Origin, insertion, action, innervation, which means what nerve goes to that muscle to tell the muscle when to contract. Like what's the name of the nerve that supplies it? Arterial supply, so the name of the artery that brings its blood. I can get a few cross sections of the muscle, which are just like slice images, but more useful are its actions. So we talked about earlier, shoulder flexion and elbow flexion. Well, if I click on elbow flexion, I can actually watch the muscle perform its action. And then it releases. and then it contracts, and it relaxes.
I have a question about this.
Yeah.
I have this app and I'm wondering what your policy is, because I've noticed on occasion there's different information in what you give or the other kinesiology teacher or what this app says. If I put on a test what this app told me, but it's different from what you've told me, which one are you gonna, like, would I get that wrong?
So first of all, I will say no two kinesiology textbooks are ever going to 100% say the exact same thing ever. And unfortunately, that's just the way it is. However, for purposes of this class, I must always default to what the trail guide says. The trail guide is the required text for this class. The trail guide is where all of the test questions come from. Therefore, I could say one thing, the app could say one thing, and the trail guide could say something else. For the purposes of this class, we will all just agree. We will just stick with whatever the trail guide says, because not everybody has this app. All of you have the same trail guide. My role here is not to make your lives more complicated. My job as a teacher is not to make this class harder on you guys. And the students who've been in my classes before will back me up on this. I really do my best to try to work with you guys. I'm not here to make your lives more complicated. I don't want to make things harder. Kinesiology is already hard enough. My job here is to help you understand it. My job here is to explain it in new and fun ways that help you understand the concepts. But yeah, if there's multiple answers for the same thing, we'll just stick with what the trail guide says. We all have the same copy of the trail guide. How many sets of sheets should we bring to the next class? Just one. Just one. You guys will only be getting onto your own sheets. So yeah, just one should be fine. And since we're doing upper body, yeah, one will be plenty. Most of us, we could just palpate our shoulder movement. We don't even have to get undressed for a lot of this stuff. So I wouldn't stress about it. Just one set will be fine.
I was curious about the reading on Moodle. For us, should we just like mark it as done? Because there's like a marking option and then there's like an upload option for like a PDF file or something.
Moodle updated their own crap and added that mark as done. That I have. I don't care. Frankly, okay. I don't care. Yeah. The way I'm going to look at it is this: you guys are grown-ups. You guys are full-on adults. You understand that there is reading that you must do for this class. If you don't do the reading, I'm not going to grade you for not doing the reading. You're going to grade yourself by not knowing what's going on in class. Kinesiology is already hard. My advice to you is not to skimp through little reading assignments. Those little reading assignments make a huge difference. That's my advice to you. But you guys are adults and you guys are responsible for your own lives. So, but I highly encourage you to read all the things that you're supposed to read. But I don't, whether you mark it as done in Moodle, I don't care. I don't even think I get notified when you mark it as done. So it's up to you.
Yeah, I think it's just for yourself to like see how much of the class you've done.
Yeah,
I think it's
Gotcha. Okay.
just for you.
I was just curious.
Yeah, I
about
don't
like,
get notified.
like an upload button and stuff. I was just like, do we like upload the pages? Like what?
No, Moodle
Yeah.
just updated itself and they didn't consult me. I don't know.
Cool. All right, thank you.
Of course.
I have one more
Any other
question.
questions, you guys?
Oh.
Yeah.
When
go ahead.
I was in your Kinesiology-Uppers like half a year ago or whatever, I had to drop out, but you had mentioned in that class something about, I'm looking at some random person.
I'm here.
I think my volume is going weird.
I can hear you just fine. I can hear you just fine for what it's worth.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. You'd mentioned something about putting together a test study class.
The MBLEX bootcamp class.
Yeah, is that something you're still planning on doing?
I'm still working on that class. Yeah,
Okay, cool.
I'm still working on it. It's a lot. It's a lot. It's a boot camp class, so I'm still putting it together.
Yeah. Cool.
Thanks for asking. I'm glad you remembered.
I'm excited about it. I will need it because I've been here for 5.5 years or something.
Girl, it is time for you to go.
Yes.
Love you to Della Reese's Pieces, but it is time for you to graduate and get licensed.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Anyone else? Questions? Comments, concerns, cogitations, ruminations? All right. Enjoy your afternoon. I will see you guys in class later this week.
Bye.
Bye, thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
My pleasure.
Bye. Okay.